Greetings, everyone. It's Katira Poland. I am the CEO of Love for Words and the hostess of Editor Knows Best podcast here on Anchor. Anchor is a free platform. You have access to tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. You can also distribute Anchor will distribute the podcast for you through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other channels. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And lastly, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Make sure you download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Editor Knows Best. My name is Katira Poland. I am the CEO of Love for Words, which is an editing boutique, and I'm also the creator and hostess of Editor Knows Best, a podcast for authors and writers. The show airs every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and you can also check out some of our episodes at anchor.fm/Editor Knows Best. So we have a very special guest today. I'm excited that she is able to join us. She is an award-winning, best-selling author and media personality. She's published 5 books in 4 different genres, including business, self-help, race, and discrimination. And she released her first book in 2007 as an independent author. Her most recent publication, Shut 'Em Down: Black Women, Racism, and Corporate America, was a #1 release on Amazon. She's also the founder of Aspiring Authors Academy, a program that provides direction, feedback, and support to new authors as they write and edit their first nonfiction book. Today's guest is Dr. Yazeed. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Yazeed.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I would love to know more about your first book and what inspired you to write that book.
Okay. So like the first book is totally different than the last book. So my first book I wrote under the pen name of CJ Domino. And I am very honest with people when people say, well, why didn't you use your real name? And I'm like, because my ex-husband was crazy and he was like, ain't nobody gonna say my wife wrote a book about a hoe. And I was saying to myself, yes, it might be your hoe, but okay, we gonna let that go. And so that book actually came about. My honest answer is that my mom was dying and I was her caretaker. Okay. And I was also the owner of an African-American bookstore at the time. And so to help me kind of escape what was the reality of what was going on with my mom, that I was losing her right before my eyes, I would write like just short stories, and some kind of way the characters started to form relationships, and it would just kind of be a way for me to escape what was going on around me. And one day I actually let my mom read them. And she was like, so when's the book coming out? And I was like, girl, I'm not publishing a book. Like, and I didn't want to tell her, this is just so I don't have to think about what's going on with you. Right. And she was just like, this is great. You have got to publish this. Yes. And I was just like, okay, maybe it's the meds, like, and didn't do anything with it. And this was actually 2 weeks before she passed. And so for the entire 2 weeks, she kept saying, did you decide if you're going to publish it? What's the title going to be? Like, she really gotten into it. And so after she passed, like, it kind of stayed with me. And I was like, well, nothing else, I can go ahead and fulfill like one of her last wishes for me. Let me go ahead and publish this. You know, the worst case scenario, my aunts are going to buy a copy, my family and friends, like, well, the book went on to become a urban bestseller, urban romance bestseller. So I was just like, oh, wow, okay, totally caught me off guard. So that's kind of the story, the story behind my first novel.
So you have your mom to thank. I'm so glad that she pushed you to do that.
Yes, because I probably would not be an author.
And what's the name of the book?
The name of my first book is Sideline Hoe.
Okay, good. So I hope you're all taking notes and you wrote that down. Definitely check out her first book. I'm so glad that you did that. So for other authors who are maybe where you were and they're not sure about writing their book, what would you recommend, or how did you overcome your fear of publishing in the beginning?
Actually, I received a lot of rejection, so my
Okay.
fear really kind of should have stayed there. I was trying to go the traditional publishing route
Okay.
because back then, this was back in like 2006, well, 2005, I actually started trying to have it self published. And all of you have to go through a literary agent. And so they were not touching Black writers with the 10-foot pole. They
Mhm.
really weren't interested in urban fiction.
Mhm.
And then your urban houses that they had at the time were ripping people the hell off. Okay.
Mhm.
So, like, they're saying,
Mhm.
oh, well, we'll give you a $2,000 advance. And you like, yeah, but you're going to sell a lot more books than that. And you
Right.
realize then the deal that you're going to get is not a good deal. And so after a couple of no's from white literary agents,
Right.
I just said, you know what? Let me self-publish this myself. Everybody else has started a publishing house for Black authors.
Mhm.
Let me start my own, but I'm just going to be my own author. I'm not going to take on other people. And that's basically what I did. Was like I
Okay.
did the research and
Awesome.
I got all the people I needed and I self-published.
Awesome. Awesome. And what were your favorite and least favorite parts of that self-publishing experience?
I think my favorite part was working with the graphic designer on the cover,
Okay.
because I had a vision for how I wanted it to look and to help him to bring that to life. So going through stock photos and us going back and forth and, him saying, hey, you're a mom. I don't think that's the right cover. And I'm saying, dude, this has nothing to do with me being a mom. This is about selling books. I need you to do this cover.
Right.
But just the whole creative process
Okay.
behind it. Least favorite is always the selling part because you got to
Mhm.
put yourself out there. You have to market. The I always say the easiest part of writing a book is writing the manuscript. That's the
Right.
easiest part. The hardest part is going to be convincing people to buy a copy. And
Right.
so yes, that was my least favorite back then. Now it doesn't bother me. I just get out there and do what I have to do.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So I know you mentioned that when you first started publishing, it was challenging for you to find publishers who were interested in urban fiction. Have you seen that change for the better over the years?
No,
Okay.
they're still not interested in us.
Okay.
They will take some of our projects if it fits into their scope of what it is that they're trying to do.
Okay.
Back after last summer when we had the riots taking place, and
Hmm.
all companies wanted to let you know that they were for Black lives, that Black lives matter. You saw some of the publishing houses put out a call
Yes.
for Black authors. And my thing was, why do you have to put out a call after all of this? Like, if you've been interested in us, we've been out here.
Exactly.
So I don't see them being interested in us, which has led to a push of more authors self-publishing.
Exactly. And the other piece of that, I have seen an increase in Black publishers as well. So there are a
Yes.
lot of options for us to work with each other and have our voice heard and taken into consideration and understood. So I'm happy to say that I've seen that change, and it appears that you,
And we're selling books.
yes.
So we've shown traditional publishing houses we don't need you and we still can sell books, and we've realized that we can make more money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for touching on that. That is amazing. And I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm excited to hear you share that as well. So we can transition. So thank you so much for giving us that beginning of, how you started with being an author. But of course, your latest release, Shut 'em Down. I would love to know more about how that anthology came about.
Again, that one came about from last summer. We're in 2021. I got to keep reminding myself. So the
Mhm.
summer of 2020, where we had George Floyd, we had the riots that took place in all 50 states, and then abroad, overseas,
Yes.
where people protesting the lives of Blacks mattered. And so it was a post that I put on LinkedIn where I talked about my experience with racism in corporate America, because LinkedIn is that type of setting.
Yes.
And kind of like my first book, didn't think anything of it, didn't think anybody would respond. Well, I woke up the next morning and had an inbox full of Black women sharing their stories
Yes.
and saying, oh my God, like you gave me permission to tell my story. And I was like, what in the world? Like, you know. And so and I said, God, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, it was just the post. Like,
Yes.
I mean, and so he was just like, you have a platform and you've been self-publishing for years. You can get this book out now,
For
where a
sure.
traditional publisher is going to take at least 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
You need to get those women together and you need to give them a platform to tell their stories. They felt
Definitely.
comfortable telling you their story. And so you have to treasure that and share their stories with the world. And basically, I mean, maybe a day or two later, I put out a call for
Yeah.
writers, and
Mhm.
some of the ladies who had actually inboxed me agreed to tell their story in the anthology. And then some of them was a whole new set of
Mhm.
women that I
Mhm.
got. So that's how that came about.
That is super exciting, and I kind of followed the tail end of that. So I have a copy of it. I haven't opened it yet, but I'm definitely excited to read it. But
Oh,
one of the
you
reasons,
gotta open it.
yes, for sure, for sure. And I'll be sure to connect with you once I've read it, and leave a review. So the reason why I was so interested is because my first book, Professionalism, What's That? It covers like code switching, and it covers how to write your resume, and things that we need to know as employees and employers that they don't teach us in school. So when I saw that you were going to be focusing on the impact of how we're treated in corporate America, I was thrilled. So like I said, my favorite chapter is code switching. So I talk about, okay, can I wear my hair in braids to this interview, or do I need to straighten my hair, and how taxing that is. So often code switching is seen as the pentacle, like if you don't do it, you're not going to make it. But I decided to talk about the cons of code switching. Like, how devastating is it that the way that your hair grows from your head makes you less valuable than somebody else, or the color of your skin, literally the shade of your skin, devalues you in some way or makes you more valuable. So when I saw your book, I was like, I have to get this book. And I was actually on one of your lives on LinkedIn where they were talking about hair bias or hair texture
Yeah.
bias. I was a part of that. I listened to that. So that's one of the reasons I was really excited to connect with you. So was there anything that you heard from the women that maybe you hadn't thought about or hadn't experienced yourself?
Um, I had two military women, and so I don't think we ever think about the military unless we're in the military, and the discrimination that they experience while being in the military, which I was just kind of like, wow, like, and it was stuff that one of the authors, she could have gotten killed. Like, it was
Yeah.
it was stuff that interfered with her doing her job.
Yeah.
That if she didn't catch it, like, just pranks, I won't even say pranks, but just things that were done to make her look like she didn't know what she was doing. But if she wouldn't have caught them in time, it could have been detrimental to either her life or the lives of those that served under her
Mhm.
command. Which was like very disturbing that people would go to those lengths. um I think another one that really kind of was just like, you hear about it on social media, but you never think about it when it comes to like maybe healthcare, and other things that we use as professional, was how algorithms are programmed to be biased.
Mm. Yes.
And even how it's in your healthcare and the services that you provide, that those providers have labels attached to them. And one of those labels is going to code their race as being Black. And
Right.
so, just, things that we don't think about or we take for granted or we think is only in one setting,
Right.
and realizing that this impacts us even when we leave work, like in other
Yes.
areas that it impacts our lives.
Definitely. And even that, racism impacts us outside of corporate America, outside of health. So, like at one point, I volunteered, and one of the ways that they used race to discriminate is they had two separate applications for the apartments. So if it was a two pager, that meant that person was African American, but if it was a one page, that meant it was a Caucasian person. So I think it can be very overwhelming to know we're being attacked from so many angles, but very very empowering to know that we have each other, that we're not alone, and that we can, share our stories and that we can move through it. So
Yes.
thank you again for sharing that. So for those listeners who maybe said, I think I want to do an anthology, what would you recommend to them?
Okay. You get you a therapist, have you a therapist on hand, because
Okay.
you are going to need it, because you are dealing with multiple personalities. And depending on the topic of the anthology, some of the people agreed to write stories, but they have not started the healing process.
Mm,
And that was one of the things that I unfortunately learned from that, shut them down.
yeah.
Fortunately, I have a background as a clinical social worker. So I
Okay.
did that for 23 years and actually had a private practice for 20 years. So early on, I started realizing that some of the women were being triggered. And I no longer practice. And so I brought in a therapist, like,
Okay.
girl, I'm going to pay you. Come in and I'm going
Right.
to need you to do some stuff with some of these women. And so she came in and talked about like triggers and,
Mhm.
how to find a therapist and how you have to work through that pain, and how writing the anthology opened up some old wounds for them that they needed to take care of. But being the person who pulls it all together, being the publisher, those are things that you really don't anticipate, that you got to be mindful of. Some people would have just been like, I'm not dealing with it. And
Right.
that's just not my character. And so I brought in a professional to help them because I saw what was going on. But at some point, I had to bring in a professional for myself because
Right.
I had become their emotional punching bag for
Hmm.
some people.
Hmm.
And I still got to make it to the next day. So
Right.
that was one of those things that I was just like, man, I did not anticipate this. Like,
Right.
it was really, really emotional. So doing an anthology, you have to be careful of the topic that you're picking. You have to screen people.
Right.
Some people will say, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this. And then you like, well, give me your story. Girl, I don't have no story. I
Hmm.
need a story from you. We getting ready to
Right.
go to print. So you are a teacher, you're the principal,
Hmm.
like you're doing all kinds of, and so you have to be organized. I had to bring in a virtual assistant
Yes.
to help manage and us to develop just flow sheets and all kind of stuff. So you have it's and again, I have been used to working by myself as far as like publishing, writing. The whole creative process was just me and the people that I worked with as far as editors, graphic designers, web designers. I had that team, but I know their personalities. I know when it's just, okay, I'll deal with you next week,
Hmm.
but when you have 15 authors or 20 authors, that's a lot of people. And
It
those are
is.
a lot of emotions.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that. So, what would you say were your favorite and least favorite parts of putting the anthology together?
Reading all the stories was
Hmm.
my most favorite.
Hmm.
Like just to see the diversity and the range and knowing that I was a part of that. Like, oh my God, like this is me. I did this.
Right.
And seeing the final book in print, like holding it like a big wave of emotions.
Hmm.
And then when the book made #1 in new releases, I think I cried for
Yeah.
like about 5-10 minutes in my office, because it was like, again, it wasn't something that I was like, okay, I'm working towards this. It's just like,
Right.
wow, like, okay,
Hmm.
caught
Right.
me off guard.
Hmm.
That was Those were like some of my most favorites,
Hmm.
just seeing the whole project come to life
Hmm.
and realizing the impact that we were making. not just on Blacks, but also educating like others
Right.
that are in corporate settings that have control over these situations.
Right.
And you know, letting them know, like, y'all keep saying y'all don't know what's going on, but this is what's going on with us. Okay, here's a whole book on it.
Mm-hmm.
So those were my most favorite parts.
Okay. And anything besides managing the personalities that created a struggle for you or a challenge for you?
That was it. That was
Okay.
it. That was
Okay.
it. Other than that, it was a great project.
Okay. So would you consider doing another anthology?
Yes, I actually have one coming out this month.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So, so my friends think I'm crazy.
Mhm.
And again, this one was totally different because we were dealing on different touch points. And so this was the where you said you had sat in on the LinkedIn Live where we were talking about hair.
Yes.
And so the new anthology that's coming out like within the next 2 weeks
Mhm.
is Can't Tell Me Nothing, the
Okay.
uncomfortable hair truths of Black women.
Okay.
And so they're
Okay.
sharing about hair shaming, hair
Mhm.
discrimination, just the whole gamut of what we go through as Black women when it comes to our hair.
Right.
And not just in a professional setting, but some of the things that have taken place behind the scenes
Absolutely.
when we were little girls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I can definitely remember the hot comb, and I mean that experience in itself is pretty traumatic, especially if you got if you got burned. So
Yeah.
I don't know that other groups understand how pivotal our hair is to our community and how strong that label is based on what type of hair you have. But I am so glad that you are bringing it to the forefront, and especially with so many multicultural families coming about. There are a lot of
Yes.
people outside of our groups who have to learn. You have a child whose hair is a lot different from yours, or a grandchild, or a niece. So I'm glad that you are bringing it to the forefront.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. So I know that hair is one of the major issues in the Shut 'Em Down anthology. What other factors did women talk about? Like, was there colorism that anyone shared about? Like, what other topics should readers look forward to once they purchase the book?
And Shut Them Down, one of the another theme that we kind of saw that developed was Black women who hurt other Black women in a professional setting.
Okay.
So sometimes the racism isn't black and white. Sometimes your racism is what we call internal racism,
Yes.
where you have those who look like you who are discriminating against you, and it's
Yes.
not colorism. So they're not discriminating against you because you are a darker skinned Black
Right.
or a lighter skinned Black.
Mm-hmm.
The racism is coming because I'm scared you gonna take my job, and
Yes.
so it's my duty to hold you down. And
Right.
so I'm going to make your life a living hell while
Mm-hmm.
you are here.
Mm-hmm.
And this person has gone in like excited to have a supervisor or a boss that looks like them, because we say
Right.
representation matters, right?
Right.
And this is like when representation goes wrong and you're just like,
Yes.
wait, hold up, what is she doing or what is
Right.
he doing? I thought we on the same team, and they looking like, nah, I'm on team me. You on
Right.
your own. Like,
Right.
so I
Okay.
saw that happen
Mhm.
a couple of in some of the stories
Okay.
that you think about it, but you just like, I was like, and people are just like, well, that's not racism. No,
It
that's a
is.
form of racism. Yes, it
Definitely.
is. It's
For
called
sure.
internal racism. So
Yes.
yes, that was the other thing that we saw.
Okay. Yeah. And then, I mean, I definitely agree with that. So many times we think that the hatred or the dislike is always external, but that's not necessarily the case.
No.
A lot of the experiences that we have start in the home. So, if you
Hmm.
have a parent or sibling who, has a discard for you or mistreats you, you carry that outside. Um, and sometimes that's reinforced outside, which makes it that much harder. But I think people kind of overlook the fact that in our community that we do discriminate against each other for a number of reasons. So
Yes,
I
we
definitely
do.
have to crack open the book now.
Yes,
So
we
yes,
do.
yes, yes, yes. So um, so I know that you wrote the anthology. You said you have another one coming up. What advice do you have for, one thing that you mentioned was the marketing was a challenge. So what advice do you have for
Yeah.
authors in the audience who struggle with that, don't know what route they should go in trying to get their book more visibility?
One thing that I see a lot, because I'm also a book coach too, is that people want to do their own book cover. If you are not a graphic designer, know the gifts and talents that God gave you, and then go find somebody that He blessed in that area and let them do your cover, because your cover becomes the center point. It is the central focus for your marketing. And if you have a jacked up book cover, I
Yeah,
don't care. You can be married to that book cover. If
right.
it is jacked up, nobody is going to buy your book. And so that is the first step where I see a lot of people mess up. They want to cut corners. So it's, I'm going to do my own book
Right.
cover. No, go hire somebody. Like, make the investment, because you're going to get your money back if you have a good
Yes.
cover. I learned that from my first book cover, and I have carried it with me every step of the way. I
Mhm.
always use a professional graphic designer. So, and professional means, how many book covers have you done?
Right.
I need some receipts.
Mhm.
Um, I think word of mouth, we don't like to toot our own horn. So we don't want to tell people that we wrote a book, but then you get mad when people don't go buy the book. Well, who did you tell? Did you tell anybody? Like,
Right.
so you have to put yourself out there. And I think a lot of authors are introverts. They don't like being bothered with people. They just want to, want to sit at our desk and write and leave me alone.
Mhm.
And you have to learn how to put yourself out there, however painful it might be. If
Yes.
you wrote it, your audience wants to interact with the author. And that was a big challenge for me when I wrote my first book. Because again, like I said, people think I'm joking. I had crazy ex-husbands. So I'm writing under a pen name. And
Mhm.
then you don't want people to know I'm your wife. And then I'm just like, dude, I gotta market this book we gotta figure out something.
Right.
And so, but I had to learn how to put myself out there. And then for me, I had to rebrand, because then I started writing under my real name at some
Yes.
point.
Mhm.
But marketing is going to require you getting over your inhibitions and getting over yourself.
Yes.
Get out of your own way. Don't
Mhm.
nobody care about you, but they want to know who wrote the book. They want to know more about you, the person.
Mhm.
And so if it means that I just schedule one interview a day, or I do one live a week,
Right.
you got to engage with your audience. You cannot get around it.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I feel like there's more options specifically for those who may be introverted. So even a
Yes.
podcast like this is very, it's minimal. It's pre-recorded. You don't have a live audience watching you. So there's so many opportunities for you to, market and publicize yourself. That doesn't necessarily involve large groups of people. So I agree with Dr. Yazeed to make sure you find ways to, talk about your book and get it out there, and then
Yeah.
use it for other opportunities. So speaking gigs can come out of your book. So there's a lot of ways that you can use your book to market yourself and make sales. I guess that's the end goal,
Yes,
right?
yes. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, the least you're trying to do is make your money back that you spend, especially if you self-publish.
Right.
Now if you go with a traditional publishing company, you trying to make back the money that they about to take from you to cover all of this stuff,
Exactly.
because most
Yes.
people don't realize that. And so you can get a check
Mhm.
at the next quarter. So
Right.
you can't be sitting here talking about, okay, I wrote a book. Girl, this ain't the field of dreams. Just
Right.
because you wrote it, they not gonna come. You got to get out there and tell
Exactly.
people about it.
Definitely, definitely. So I know that at one point you had mentioned, you had to transition from working for yourself, by yourself, to a team. So
Yes.
how did you go about finding the professionals in the team to help you? Because our audience, again, they're authors and they might not have a team. So what would you recommend to them to find trusted professionals to help them?
Oh, okay, so like, let's say it's a book. When I first started, if it was a book that I liked and I loved the cover, I flipped through to see if they mentioned who the graphic designer was. And if they did, I would contact them. So actually, one of the graphic designers, he did the typesetting for the inside of my book. He worked with Elin Harris.
Okay.
And so I contacted him for the cover, and he was like, he couldn't do it, but he was like, I could do the typesetting. And so like I've made connections that way.
Okay.
Asked other authors, like, you know, hey, I really like your cover. Who is the graphic designer? And then from there, reach out and then say, like, who recommended me. So my whole team now, they are individuals that I have worked with on several projects.
Okay.
The only reason I'm not working with the graphic designer from my first book was that he died shortly thereafter. That was the best experience ever. I took him so much out of his comfort zone, but we came up with a killer cover. And so, but everyone else, they're people that I've built relationships with. They know me, I know them, and we are a good fit. So my editor, my typesetter, I have a designer for the website, a designer for the flyers on social media, and then I got a designer for the cover. Like, it's a team.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
but it was built over time.
Exactly. And I definitely agree with the delegation piece. So I now have a virtual assistant, and I do have graphic designers and editors and things that I work with or refer to. So yes, I agree with Dr. Yazeed. If you need a team, make sure you go out and reach out to other authors. Facebook groups are a great place to start. There's Fiverr. Yeah, there's Fiverr with 2 R's. There's a lot of places for you to look to get help. So don't be afraid to reach out. Google is super easy to use. So make sure you take advantage. However, I will say, make sure that the resources that you are referring to are reputable, because we know that so many things online are not reputable. So double check ask for samples, double check the work that they've done, look for reviews, things like that. All the things that Dr. Yazeed knows, I'm just saying out loud. So that's awesome. So I'm so glad that, you shared that with us. I would like to know, just in general, does writing exhaust you, or does it excite you or energize you?
Oh no, writing never exhausts me.
Okay.
I have, now when I think back on it, I've been writing probably all of my life. In high school, I had an English teacher who really pushed me, like, you need to major in English. And my mom was like, girl, don't nobody make no money with no English degree. They go get a real degree, And then my parents were paying for it. So it was like, that degree is out. But it was one teacher who really believed in me. And she's just like, your writing is like amazing. I was just like, yeah, okay, kid from the hood. All right. Sounds great,
Right.
But one of my side hustles in high school was that I would write my classmates' papers. And so I never had to ask my parents for an allowance because I always had extra money.
Right.
And when an English teacher, this was a different English teacher, when she figured out what I was doing, she pulled me to the side and I just said, oh, I'm about to fail this class. Like, my parents are going to kill me. She's about to flunk me. And so she's like, how much are you charging? I didn't say anything. So she's like, look, I know about the hustle. And so I told her, and she said, oh, you undercharge and you need to charge them more money. And I was just like, really? And so she helped me develop like a price sheet. And I was just like, so I've been writing. And writing just excites me. It gives me energy. I also love to read the work of other people and help them to shape it. Like, it's like, you think it's good, but we're about to make this great. Like, these are some things I need to see you tweak and change. And, and I like to push people out of their comfort zone. It's just like, tell me more about this. And I've just had some people say, I'm not doing all of that. Okay, well, nobody's going to buy the book. Like, you giving me surface stuff, girl. We need to go deep. Let's peel back some layers. Let's go deep. So anything that pertains to writing, I love it. I love it.
Awesome. I agree. I also am energized by writing for the most part. So I can agree with that. So I do know you mentioned you're a book coach, and we briefly mentioned your Aspiring Authors Academy. But if you'd like to give us a little bit more information about that, I'm sure our audience would appreciate it.
Just in the past, I was helping everybody for free. Like, people would just, And then
Yeah.
I realized, like, wait a minute, but then I would help them. And then it's kind of like the whole regurgitation process. I realized they were going back and charging people for what I had showed
Oh,
them how to do.
yeah.
It's just like, hold on, wait a minute. And I'm like, and people paying y'all for, okay, I know, no,
Right.
because I taught you the game.
Yes.
Like, and so after shut them down, I started getting people to reach out to me, and it was some people saying I want to do an anthology, and not realizing and they wanted to do the anthology, but they wanted me to do all the work. And
Oh,
I'm like,
okay.
that comes with a price tag.
For
Like,
sure.
I'm just not gonna do this for free.
Absolutely.
But I can show you how to do it. I had aspiring authors, never written a book. And so I offered a class, and then from the class, people were like, okay, what's next? And I was just like, okay. So I started the academy. Right now, I have 8 women that are enrolled in the academy. It's a 6-month program. And I basically take them from their great idea to, by when we end in June, they will each have a published copy of their book. And so I walk you through the process, but it's really, I'm doing developmental editing. I'm helping you find your graphic designer. Like, you are learning the process, because I'm teaching them how to fish for themselves. So when I finish with you, you don't have to come back to me. You know how to do this on your own. And so that's what the Aspiring Authors Academy is about. And for those people who don't like to do the group stuff, because some people like, I ain't no group person. I do offer one-on-one book coaching as well. And it's pretty much the same thing. You got to work with me for at least 6 months, because that's pretty much how long it's going to take.
Right.
If not longer. So people think writing a book is instant.
No.
I don't care if you don't wrote the manuscript. By the time we get through tearing it apart, you got to go write some more. So
Right.
it is a process.
It is.
Nobody writes the perfect first draft. And with aspiring authors, that's that hump that I usually have to get them over.
For sure. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Before we wrap up, I would love to know who are some of the writers and authors that inspire you?
Ooh, I am a fan of James Baldwin. Elin Harris is another favorite of mine. Terry McMillan, Maya Angelou. And all of these, I know some people just like, girl, them people older, they did. Okay, but here's the deal. Back when I was growing up, even though they were authors, like, their stuff wasn't readily available in the South. And so these were some of the first authors that I read, and their stuff has just stuck with me over time. We had Eric Jerome Dickey, which I just like to fall out on the floor when they said he died. How? What happened? What's going on?
Yeah.
Those were game changers for
sure.
me. Those are the people that I don't care what they write, I'm going to pick up a book that if they've written it, I'm gonna purchase it, I'm gonna read it. They are my go-to, and I will read them again and again and again. Their stuff is timeless.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad to, learn a little bit more about what, authors and writers that you like and who influence you. So for all of our listeners who want to follow you, or they want your services, or they want to buy your book, where can they find you?
Okay, so on social media, I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter and Clubhouse. I don't know what I'm doing on Clubhouse, y'all, but I'm on Clubhouse. And on all those platforms, I am at Dr. Yazeed. So it's easy to find me. If you want to know more about me and how to work with me, please visit aspiringauthors.coach.com. And there you can find out about the programs that I offer, and how we can, work together and we can connect. And I also have a podcast that comes out weekly on Apple Podcasts, and it's called Baldwin Was Right.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so excited that you were able to join us and impart knowledge and tell us a little bit more about Dr. Yazeed. And thank you to all of the listeners who tuned in to this episode. Again, Editor Knows Best airs every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can visit anchor.fm/Editor Knows Best to listen to a few of our episodes. Thank you again for listening. Be safe and be well, everyone.